Welcome to the deep dive.
Oh, hey, great to be here.
Today, we're going to be diving into the world of Kabbalah, a Jewish mystical tradition that explores some pretty big questions about like the nature of God, our purpose in the universe, how the universe works.
Right.
And our guide for this deep dive is this article I found called Kabbalah, Tracing Its Roots and Mystical Relevance from the Spiritual Seek.
Interesting.
One of the things that really intrigued me when I was kind of looking this over was this idea of shattered vessels and sparks of holiness that are kind of like scattered everywhere.
Yeah. It's a really cool...
It sounds like a cosmic puzzle we have to put back together.
It really is. It's like, it's not just about understanding these concepts, like God created the world and then like stepped back.
Right.
It's like, no, God's involved.
Yeah.
There are these forces that are constantly interacting, and it's a much more dynamic kind of a vision of creation.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
So obviously Kabbalah didn't just kind of like rope out of nowhere.
Yeah.
What are its origins?
Yeah. So it actually has, it's connected to earlier Jewish mystical texts, and particularly Merkavah mysticism.
Okay.
So like imagine these ancient mystics, they were using prayer and meditation and even, fasting and these really intense spiritual practices to have these incredibly intense spiritual experiences.
Oh, wow.
Like journeys to celestial realms, like really powerful stuff.
So not your average meditation retreat.
Yeah, definitely not your average meditation retreat.
So when did Kabbalah, as we know it today, actually kind of like emerge as a distinct system of thought?
Yeah, so it really started taking shape around the late 12th century. And there's this text called Sefirot, or the Book of Brightness.
Okay.
And this is where we see the idea of the 10 Sefirot being introduced. So these are like these divine attributes, like they're like blueprints for understanding creation, and they're really going to become like a core concept in Kabbalah as it evolves.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier that it's not just like this God creates the world and steps back. There's more of like an ongoing creative process. So there's got to be some key text that kind of like explains that, right?
Well, there is. And that leads us to like one of the most important texts in Kabbalah, which is the Zohar.
Zohar, okay.
The Zohar, yeah. So it's a mystical commentary on the Torah, which is, like the first 5 books of the Jewish Bible.
Right. So for someone who's not familiar with that, it's kind of like the foundation of Jewish...
Yeah, it's like the foundation of Jewish tradition and law.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and the Zohar, it takes those foundational stories and it interprets them through this mystical lens, right?
Yeah.
And reveals these deeper layers of meaning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
it's like a decoder ring for the Torah.
It's like a secret decoder ring. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And so one of the key things that it reveals is this idea that God isn't this like distant figure who created the world and then just stepped back.
Right.
The Zohar shows us a God who is constantly involved in creation, in this dynamic relationship with everything that exists.
So less watchmaker God, more like cosmic dancer God.
Yeah, I love that.
I like that too.
Yeah, it's less about like a set plan.
Yeah. And
more about this ongoing creative flow between the divine and creation.
Yeah, I like that image a lot.
Yeah.
The Zohar also seems to really emphasize looking beyond the surface of things. Like I was reading this quote. It said, "In the beginning, one must consider the beginning."
Oh, that's a good one.
Which is above all beginnings.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Right. So it's basically saying that, there are always more layers of understanding to uncover. Both about, the universe and ourselves. And it's really setting the stage for how Kabbalah is going to continue to evolve over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of how it evolves,
right.
Our article mentions a couple of really important figures that kind of shaped how we understand Kabbalah today.
Yeah.
And the first one that it mentions is Rabbi Isaac Luria.
Yes.
Also known as the Ari.
The Ari.
What made him so influential?
Yeah, so the Ari, he lived in the 16th century, and he introduced some really like revolutionary concepts to Kabbalah, and one of the most important is this idea of dimsum.
Dimsum, okay.
Yeah, which is this idea that God had to like contract in order to make space for the world.
So God, like, shrinks.
It's kind of like a shrinking.
Yeah. I mean, how can an infinite being shrink?
Right. It's mind-bending, right?
Yeah.
But think about it. If God's presence filled absolutely everything, there wouldn't be any room for anything else to exist.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this contraction is like,
making space for creation to happen.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's just the first crazy thing he says.
And he goes even further, right? So he introduces this other concept called Sefirot HaKilim.
Sefirot HaKilim.
Yeah, the breaking of the vessels.
Okay.
So he's saying that when God's light poured into this like newly created space, some of the vessels containing that light couldn't handle its intensity and they shattered.
So first there's a cosmic contraction, then there's exploding vessels.
It's a dramatic story.
This is a very dramatic story.
Yeah.
What happens to all those pieces?
Yeah, so those broken vessels, along with the sparks of holiness they contained, they scattered throughout the world.
Oh, wow.
And Luria taught that this is actually the root of chaos and evil in the world, right? It's the result of these divine sparks being lost and hidden.
So is there any hope?
Well, yeah, this is where another one of his concepts comes in, which is tikkun.
Okay.
Which means restoration.
So he said that humanity actually has a crucial role to play in repairing those shattered vessels and elevating those sparks of holiness.
Okay, so we do have, there is a little glimmer of hope here.
Yeah.
What do we have to do, like cosmic glue or something?
No, not cosmic glue.
Okay.
But he said we contribute to tikkun through, ethical actions, living by the Jewish commandments, through spiritual practices. It's really about aligning our actions with a higher purpose.
Oh, so it's not just about personal enlightenment. It's also about like taking responsibility for healing the world around us.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did he say anything like particularly like poignant about this?
Yeah, he had this amazing quote. He said, when the vessels broke, the sparks of holiness fell into all the world. The world is full of these sparks, and our task is to elevate them.
It gives you like a real sense of purpose, right?
Yeah.
You're not just here to like exist. You're here to like make a difference.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
So that's Luria's vision. Were there other Kabbalists who had slightly different approaches?
Absolutely. And actually one of the most prominent figures with like a contrasting perspective was Rabbi Moshe Cordovero.
Okay, Cordovero.
Yeah. So unlike Luria, who focused on these like dramatic cosmic events, Cordovero had a much more methodical and structured approach.
So if Luria is like the revolutionary, Cordovero is the systematizer.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's best known for his work, Pardes Rimonim.
Pardes Rimonim.
Pardes Rimonim, yeah. Which means the Orchard of Pomegranates.
That sounds pretty.
Yeah, it's a beautiful title.
Yeah.
And it's like this comprehensive guide to Kabbalah that attempts to like clarify and organize all these like complex mystical ideas.
So it seems like he really wanted to make Kabbalah more accessible, easier to understand.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah,
like to make it easier to study and understand.
What were some of his like key ideas, if you will?
Yeah, so he really focused on the Sefirot, those divine attributes we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And he saw them as more than just abstract concepts. He believed that they were actual channels of divine energy, each playing a specific role in how creation works.
So if you could understand the Sefirot, you could understand like how God interacts with the universe.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And he believed that they weren't just out there in the cosmos. They also exist within each of us.
Okay.
And he taught that by studying and cultivating those divine qualities, we can actually become more whole and balanced as individuals.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Kabbalah is not just about like lofty spiritual ideas. It's also about like how we live and how we grow as people.
Absolutely. Yeah. It has very practical implications for our lives.
Okay.
And Cordovero, he had this quote that really reflects his view of how everything is connected through these divine emanations.
Okay.
And he says, from Keter to Malkuth, this downward flow of divine light creates and sustains existence.
So Keter and Malkuth, those are two of the Sefirot.
Yes, exactly. Keter represents the highest, most transcendent aspect of God, while Malkuth represents the manifestation of the divine in the physical world.
Okay.
So this quote is basically saying that all of existence, from the most spiritual to the most material, is connected through this flow of divine energy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there's like a chain of connection then between the highest realms to our everyday lives.
Precisely. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is.
Okay, so we have Luria with this dramatic vision of creation and tikkun, and then we have Cordovero with his structured, systematized approach.
Right.
Are there any other players in this, like, evolution of Kabbalah?
There is one more that we should definitely mention, and that's Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi.
Okay.
Who is the founder of Shabbat Hasidism.
Okay, so Hasidism, I know that's a movement within Judaism that really emphasizes joy and a more experiential approach to spirituality.
Exactly.
How did he connect that to Kabbalah?
Yeah, so he brought this really unique perspective by bridging like the intellectual and the experiential aspects of Kabbalah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So it's not just about thinking about it, it's about feeling it.
Exactly. So Zalman, who lived in the 18th century, he believed that intellectual understanding was important, but it wasn't enough.
Right.
You have to feel those concepts. You have to let them transform your heart and how you live in the world.
So he was all about bringing those heady Kabbalistic ideas down to earth and making them relevant for, like, everyday people.
Yeah, exactly. And his most famous work is called Tanya.
Okay.
And it offers this really, like, insightful look at the inner workings of the soul and how to cultivate this deeper relationship with God.
Okay, so it sounds like a pretty big shift from some of the earlier Kabbalistic texts, which were often seen as very complex and even secretive.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And Zalman, he believed that Kabbalah shouldn't be reserved for just a select few. You know, he wanted to make these teachings accessible to everyone, encourage a more personal and heartfelt connection with the divine.
I've also heard that Hasidism is really big on community. Did he bring that into his approach to Kabbalah as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the role of the Rebbe, which is the spiritual leader, is central to Hasidic Kabbalah.
Okay.
So the Rebbe, he guides and inspires the community. He offers teachings and practices to deepen their spiritual connection. So it's very much about like learning and growing together and supporting each other on the path.
So it sounds like he really kind of like democratized the tradition.
Yeah.
It was less about elite knowledge and more about a shared journey of spiritual growth.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Okay. Is there anything else like we need to know about the different like approaches within Kabbalah?
Well, there's one more current within Kabbalah that we should mention, and that's practical Kabbalah.
Okay.
So as the name suggests, it's really focused on the application of Kabbalistic teachings in everyday life.
So this is where things get like a little bit more hands-on.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So practical Kabbalah uses rituals, meditations, and other techniques to kind of harness spiritual energy for specific purposes.
Like what kinds of purposes?
Well, it could be anything from healing practices to attracting abundance or even protection. It's really about like bringing those mystical principles down to earth and using them to navigate, you know, the challenges and opportunities that we face in our daily lives.
I can see how that would be appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just about understanding the concepts.
Right.
It's about how do you actually take that knowledge and apply it to your life.
Yeah. And these different currents within Kabbalah, while they're unique to their emphasis, they're all interconnected. They offer this really rich tapestry of approaches to exploring these mystical ideas and applying them to our lives.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a pretty good overview, I think, now of history and the key players who've shaped how we understand Kabbalah today.
Right.
But what about the bigger picture? Like, why does Kabbalah matter? Why is it so compelling to so many people, even centuries after it first emerged?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest reasons is that Kabbalah offers this really profound framework for understanding the divine. You know, it provides a way to grapple with those big questions about God, creation, our place in it all.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
a spiritual roadmap, like helping us navigate those existential questions that we're all grappling with.
I like that, a spiritual roadmap.
I like it too. One of the things that I find fascinating about Kabbalah is how much it seems to resonate with other spiritual traditions, especially like Eastern philosophies. Like it's almost as if they're all pointing towards some of the same truths, even though they come from such different cultures and backgrounds.
Yeah, and there's so many parallels, especially I think when it comes to the interconnectedness of all things. For example, the Kabbalistic concept of divine emanation, where creation flows from God, seems to echo like the Hindu concept of Brahman.
Okay.
Which is the ultimate reality.
Yeah.
From which everything arises.
So it's like both traditions are saying at the deepest level.
Yeah.
Everything is connected.
Yes.
Everything comes from the same source.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that emphasis on interconnectedness is so relevant today as we become more aware of how our actions impact the world around us and how we're all part of this like delicate web of life.
Yeah, that's a good point. Speaking of interconnectedness,
right.
I think maybe we should take a closer look at the Sefirot.
Yeah.
They seem to be like a key part of understanding Kabbalah's map of reality.
Absolutely. Yeah. Understanding the Sefirot is like getting a glimpse into the blueprint of creation itself.
Okay, well, I'm ready for that. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so the Sefirot. Remember, they're not just these like abstract concepts. They're dynamic forces, like emanations of divine energy that are shaping the universe and ourselves.
So it's kind of like a personality profile for the divine. 10 distinct qualities that kind of make up the essence of God.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And the cool thing is, as we explore these Sefirot, you might start to see them reflected in your own life, in your own personality. It's like Kabbalah gives us a way to see ourselves through this divine lens.
I'm ready to see my divine reflection. Where do we start?
Okay, so we start at the top with Keter, the crown. This is like the highest Sephar. It represents like the pure, boundless will of God, the source of all creation. Think of it like the seed of a giant oak tree.
Okay.
All that potential is contained within that tiny seed.
So Keter is like the big bang of divine energy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And from that initial burst of potential, we get Chakma, wisdom. So this Sephira represents like the first flash of creative insight, like the aha moment where ideas start to take shape.
So if Keter is the seed, Chakma is that little sprout pushing its way up.
Perfect analogy. But those initial sparks of creativity, they need some structure.
Okay.
They need some way to take form, and that's where Bina comes in, understanding.
Okay.
This Sephira represents the power of analysis, discernment, giving shape to those raw creative impulses.
So Bina is like the gardener who comes along and helps that little sprout grow into a strong, healthy tree.
I love that. You're really getting this.
Okay, good.
Okay, so now we move into the realm of like emotional attributes.
Okay.
With cheese, loving kindness.
Okay, cheese.
Yeah. So this is the pure, boundless love and compassion that flows through everything. It's the force that connects us all.
This is the one I've heard the most about, cheese, the heart of Kabbalah. It's like unconditional love, right?
Yes, exactly. It's the force that wants to give and nurture without limits.
Oh, okay.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
We also have Gevura, strength or severity.
Wait, strength and severity, those don't sound very loving. Doesn't that kind of clash with keys?
Well, it might seem that way. But Gevura isn't about being harsh or punishing.
Okay.
It's about setting boundaries, about knowing when to say no.
Okay.
Even out of love. It's the discipline that helps us use that boundless love wisely.
Oh, okay. So you need both. You need that overflowing love, but you also need the strength to set limits. Like you can be super generous, but if you don't have any boundaries, you're going to end up depleted or taken advantage of.
Exactly. And that balance, that integration of cheese and Gevura, leads us to Tiferet, beauty or harmony.
Tiferet.
Yeah. This Sephira represents the perfect balance between those seemingly opposite forces.
Okay.
So it's the essence of compassion, the ability to be both strong and tender.
So Tiferet is where love and discipline, giving and receiving all kind of come together.
Beautifully put. It's like a perfectly balanced scale where both sides are in harmony.
We're only halfway through. What's next?
Okay, next we have Netzach, endurance or victory.
Okay.
This Sephira is all about perseverance, the drive to overcome obstacles and achieve our goals.
I feel like we could all use a little more Netzach these days, especially when things get tough.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that inner strength that helps us keep going.
Yeah.
Even when we face setbacks or challenges.
Warrior energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that true victory often comes from inner resilience, not just outward force.
Okay. So we've got loving kindness, strength, harmony, perseverance.
Right.
What other divine qualities are in this mix?
Okay, next up is Hod, splendor, or humility.
Humility. That sounds a little different.
Yeah.
How does humility fit in with splendor?
So this one is all about recognizing that we're not the sole source of our achievements.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging the greater forces at play, surrendering to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
And And true splendor, true brilliance often comes from that place of humility.
It's like that saying, there's no I in team. Realizing that we're part of something bigger, and our success is often due to the contributions of others, or even just being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Oh.
Okay, and now for the Sefirot that's really important for bringing all these qualities into the real world, we have Yesod, foundation.
Okay.
So this one acts as a channel through which all the other Sefirot flow and manifest in the physical realm.
So it's like the bridge between the spiritual and the material.
Precisely. Think of it like the foundation of a house.
Okay.
You can have beautiful blueprints and strong building materials, but without a solid foundation, it all falls apart.
That makes sense. So we've gone through 9 of the 10 Sefirot. What's the grand finale?
Okay, we end with Malkuth, kingdom or sovereignty. And this Sefirot represents the manifestation of the divine in the physical world.
Okay.
Like the culmination of the entire Sephirotic flow.
So if Keter is the seed and Chokmah is that little sprout, Malkuth is the full-grown tree.
Exactly. It's the realm of nature, our bodies, all tangible creation. Think of it as like the grounding force, the anchor of all those divine energies in our physical reality.
It's like the final destination of that divine light where it all comes together and takes form.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's where that spiritual blueprint becomes a living, breathing reality.
Wow, I'm starting to see how these Sephirots aren't just random concepts. They're like a map of creation, and maybe even a map for understanding ourselves, too.
That's one of the most amazing things about Kabbalah. It offers this framework for understanding how the divine operates on a cosmic level and within each of us.
Okay, so now that we have like a better grasp of the Sefirot, can we go back to Tzimtzum? That idea of God contracting to make space for creation, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
Of course, yeah. It's a mind-bending concept, but remember, it's not just about this one-time event.
Right.
Kabbalah teaches that this contraction is ongoing. It's this dynamic interplay between divine presence and absence that creates the space for us to exist, to make choices.
So it's not like God just stepped back and said, okay, you guys handle it from here.
Right.
It's more like there's this constant dance between the divine and creation.
Exactly. And that divine absence, that space that Tzimtzum creates, is actually really important for our spiritual growth.
Okay.
It's in those moments when we feel most alone, most disconnected, that we have the opportunity to really search for the divine, to develop our own inner strength and resilience.
So those times when I'm feeling lost or disconnected, those aren't failures.
No.
They're actually opportunities for growth.
Exactly.
Okay.
Think about it. If we constantly felt God's presence, if everything was always easy and blissful, would we ever really develop our own spiritual muscles?
I guess not. So it's like going to the gym. If you never lift anything heavy, you're not going to build any strength.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
So those challenges, those moments of doubt, are actually crucial for our spiritual development.
They're like spiritual weight training. And Kabbalah reminds us that even in those moments of darkness, those sparks of holiness are still there, waiting to be uncovered and elevated.
So even when we can't see or feel that divine light, it's still there.
Yes.
Woven into the fabric of creation.
Yes, exactly. And we have the power to choose to connect with those sparks, to fan them into flames through our actions and intentions.
This is giving me a whole new perspective on challenges. But, whenever we talk about spirituality, it's easy to get caught up in those big ideas and concepts.
Right.
I'm curious how Kabbalah kind of guides us in terms of actually living a good and meaningful life.
Yeah, that's where the concept of tikkun olam comes in, right? Repairing the world. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness with all things and acting in ways that bring healing and harmony to the world around us.
So it's not just about personal enlightenment, it's about using that understanding to make a positive difference in the world.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be about grand gestures or, saving the entire world.
Right.
It starts with our everyday choices. Kabbalah teaches that even the most seemingly insignificant actions can be infused with intention and become an act of tikkun.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Yeah, it can be as simple as like being kind to a stranger, offering a helping hand to someone in need.
Okay.
Or even just being more mindful of our impact on the environment. Every choice we make, every action we take has the potential to either contribute to the brokenness of the world or to its healing.
So it's about bringing that awareness of interconnectedness, that sense of responsibility into every aspect of our lives.
Exactly.
It's like living with this heightened sense of purpose.
That's beautifully put. And it's not about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about recognizing when we've fallen short, and making a conscious effort to choose differently next time.
Yeah. This is making me rethink my to-do list. Maybe instead of like pick up dry cleaning, I should write perform an act of tikkun olam.
Yeah.
But seriously, it is empowering to think that we all have the capacity to make a difference, even in small ways.
Exactly. And that's what makes Kabbalah so relevant today. It's not just an ancient mystical tradition. It's a guide for living a more conscious, compassionate, and purposeful life in the modern world.
Yeah. This has been such an amazing exploration of Kabbalah so far. I feel like we've only scratched the surface, but I already have so much to think about.
Yeah, there's always more to discover. But before we wrap things up, I think it's important to remember that Kabbalah doesn't just offer intellectual knowledge. It offers a path to direct experience of the divine.
Okay, so how do we go from reading about these concepts to actually experiencing them?
Yeah, that's where practices like meditation come in.
Okay.
Kabbalah has a rich tradition of meditative techniques that are designed to quiet the mind, open the heart, and cultivate a deeper connection with the divine.
So it's about going beyond just like the thinking about it and tapping into some deeper level of knowing.
Exactly, yeah. And the cool thing is many of these techniques resonate with practices found in other spiritual traditions like mindfulness or contemplative prayer. So even if you're new to Kabbalah, you might already have some tools in your spiritual toolbox that you can use to explore these teachings on a deeper level.
I love that idea, that we can draw from different traditions and find the practices that resonate with us. It's like creating our own personalized spiritual path.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you and being open to new ways of connecting with the divine.
Yeah, this deep dive into Kabbalah has been so enriching.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground, from its historical origins and key figures to its core principles like the Sefirot and Tzimtzumim.
Yeah.
And we've explored how those ideas can be applied to live a more meaningful and purposeful life. But I'm curious, what's one key takeaway, one nugget of wisdom that you hope listeners will carry with them from our exploration today?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It is a good question.
That's hard to pick just one.
I know.
Because Kabbalah is so rich and multi-layered.
It is.
But if I had to choose, I'd say it's this idea that we all have this spark of divinity within us. And that spark connects us to something much greater than ourselves.
Yeah. I like that a lot. It reminds me of that quote from the Ari.
Yes.
When the vessels broke, the sparks of holiness fell into all the world. The world is full of these sparks, and our task is to elevate them.
I love that quote. It's like this call to action, right?
Yeah.
It's this invitation to see the world and ourselves through this lens of potential and possibility.
It's like we're all carrying around these little pieces of the divine puzzle, and our job is to figure out where they fit and how to put it all back together.
Exactly. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is, we don't have to do it alone. Right?
That's true.
We can learn from each other. We can support each other. We can inspire each other on this journey.
That's what I love about the deep dive. It's like we're all on this journey of discovery together.
Totally.
Speaking of discovery, though, our article did mention a quiz to kind of test our Kabbalah knowledge. It's fun.
Maybe that would be a good way for our listeners to see how much they absorbed from our conversation today.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun way to kind of solidify what we've learned and maybe even spark some new questions.
And remember, this deep dive is just a starting point.
Yes.
There's a whole world of Kabbalah waiting to be explored.
So much to explore.
So if something that we talked about today resonated with you, I encourage you to keep digging.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions and see where this path leads you.
And who knows, you might be surprised by what you discover.
Yeah.
Both about Kabbalah and about yourself.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mystical world of Kabbalah.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.